from the Spit Studios in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. This is the Spit Sports Show. So, I've been working on a project for a little while now, and I've kind of been waiting for the perfect time to film this video and release it. Now, with Crosby and Ovechkin playing each other last night, and Penguins fans giving him a standing ovation, which is something that I never thought I would ever see in a Pennsylvania sports arena. We all know how that state treats opposing teams and their own teams sometimes. They're very, very, you know, passionate, is the word I'll use to describe them, about their squads. But both Crosby and Ovi at this point of their careers are obviously on the back nine. They are trending towards the end of their illustrious careers. And I think fans can realize that. Obviously, they can, because in their primes, there is no chance, there's not a snowball's chance in a microwave that the Penguins fans would ever take the time to salute one of the greatest hockey players ever. And I bet Washington fans will reciprocate that love once Crosby decides that he's going to end his career or he hits the 2,000 point mark, which is still very much so in the balance. So, with all that said, after scoring back to back goals last night, which was just awesome to see, both of them have maybe a couple years left, but it's going to be difficult at this point in their careers to really enhance their legacies. At this point, Ovi has one more year left on his contract, and then all signs indicate that he's going to go back to Russia to play with the Moscow Dynamo, which is where he started his career. He might be able to have another 40-goal season. I think that 1,000 regular season goals is probably out of the equation at this point for him, but he might end his career around 930, 940, which would be incredibly impressive. So, really, unless the Caps win the cup this year, which is a possibility, there's no doubt about it, but I wouldn't say they're one of the top 5 favorites, even with their dynamite regular season. That's really the only way he can enhance his legacy at this point. Crosby, it's the same thing. He's a couple years younger and he might play for a little longer. He really hasn't shown any signs of slowing down, and he doesn't have a home country to go to. But the thing that hurts Crosby right now, obviously, is that his team is not even close to competing for a Stanley Cup, and leaving his team to cup chase with the Avs, like it was rumored a while ago, or another team like that, the Stars maybe, it wouldn't have the same provenance as a cup with the Penguins or his original team would. So Crosby could make it to 2,000 points, like I mentioned. He's 37 right now, and I could definitely see him playing till he's 40 to 41. So the last 5 years, he has averaged 1.15 points per game, and he needs 315 points at the time of filming this to get it done. So if he keeps pace and plays all 82 for his next 3 to 4 years of playing, which is a lot to ask, but it's he should be there about a third of the way through his age 40 season. So about 3 years from now. So that is definitely on the board. So there are little things that Crosby and Ovechkin can do at this point to enhance their legacies. But at this point in NHL history, their legacies are all but set. I think we can acknowledge the fact that although there are, the 2,000 point mark, potentially another cup for Ovi, those are definitely big markers. There's really not much they can do to enhance their status in terms of the greatest players in the history of the game. So now I think is a great time to start placing these guys definitively amongst the all-time greats with their whole bodies of work kind of in the rearview mirror. So there's a couple of things that I want to contextualize about both of these guys' career before I get into the historic elements of this, because I think it's important. So with Ovi first, Ovechkin wasn't even in the NHL until he turned 20 years old. He has a really weird birthday when it comes to draft years. He was born on September 17th. I think the deadline for draftees is September 14th or something like that. And there was this whole story about the Florida Panthers and how they like begged the NHL basically to move him up to the 2003 draft. And it was a whole shebang. But, anyways, he got he was ineligible for the 2003 draft. And his late start probably cost him another, I don't know, 40 to 70 goals as a teenager. Because I refuse to believe an 18, 19-year-old Ovi wouldn't have at least scored 30 goals a year. And add on to that the fact that he missed half of the 2012-2013 season due to a lockout and the 2020 pandemic. So that eliminated another about 74 games of his career, which, according to his goal average, could have added another 45-ish goals to his career. So Ovechkin is also, in terms of his goal scoring, played in a 5.7 goals per game between both teams environment compared to Gretzky's 7.0 for his entire career. So basically what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is Ovechkin is all-time great. Everybody knows that. But there have been certain elements out of his control throughout his career that have made his career numbers not look as good as they even should be. They're obviously phenomenal now, but they should be even a touch better. And in terms of era adjusted goals, he's already number one in that stat by a mile, just ahead of Gordie Howe. So what I'm basically trying to say is Ovi should probably now already have well over 1,000 goals. He's undisputedly the greatest goal scorer of all time, but he should have more in a nutshell. And with Crosby and the era adjustment, all of the missed time because of his, locked out rookie season, the pandemic, the lockout in 2012-13, all of that stuff applies as well. But with Crosby, what people don't remember is that concussions almost derailed his career before he even started winning his back-to-back Stanley Cups and going on his great run. During the heart of his prime, age 23 to age 25 seasons from 2010 to 13, he only played 99 games total. So if you think about that, Crosby should probably be well above 2,000 points at this point in his career, too. So taking his career average of 1.24 and expanding that out over the total of his career, if he played 80 games a year for his 19 seasons, he would actually only be about 100 points short of 2,000, which, if I'm being honest, when I did that math, I was a little surprised it wasn't closer to that 2,000 mark. But the thing is, Crosby hasn't really had that many huge, 130 point seasons. I think his career high is somewhere around 120, but he's just been the model of consistency for his entire career. He just doesn't have crazy individual seasons. Obviously, he has the most point per game seasons ever, and the guy is just a workhorse and basically could average a point a game in his sleep. Just doesn't have quite the high peaks that some of these other guys do. He's already fourth all time in era adjusted points. Ovi sits at fifth. So with all of that context in mind, I'm going to add a little bit more context to this list that I'm about to make. So legends in hockey, they can really be put into two buckets. So you have all time, which is every player who's ever played in the NHL. And then you have the modern era, which I kind of say the expansion era. So about 67, 70 on is the modern NHL. So for most people, they'll go from about 1970 on because they claim that the game back then was so different, it's really impossible to compare. And in some ways, that is true. It's obviously next to impossible. It's nowhere near an exact science to compare someone who played in 1950 to 2000 to a guy who played in 2000, rather, I should say. But the thing is that I don't like about that line of reasoning is like, where do we draw that line? Why is it 1967, 1970? I get it sounds good, the expansion era, but this game just in 15 years has changed drastically in terms of the amount of goals scored, the amount of travel, the way guys are keeping care of their body, the skill level, everything. So why do we use 1970 or 75 or 80 or whatever as a benchmark when I would argue those eras are just as different to now as an era like the 50s were? Like, I understand it was a long time ago, and most people aren't alive who saw those guys play. But my question to that would be like, in 30 years, are we not going to be able to include Gretzky in the all-time great conversations? Because at that point, he would be as much in the past as a guy like Bobby Clark, or I'm trying to think of a good 60s example, Bobby Orr is today. So I don't think that's fair. I think you have to compare eras in every era, because there is really no benchmark to say this is where the new hockey began. It just doesn't exist. So clearly you need to go off of who was the best in his era, how much did he dominate that period of time. And I also just have a weird infatuation with hockey history. I probably know enough or more about 40s and 50s and 1930s NHL players than I probably care to admit on this video. So what I'm going to be doing is an all-time ranking. I'll do a modern era ranking another time, but for anyone who doesn't want to hear about Howie Morenz or Doug Harvey for a minute or two, that video will be for you. But if you want to hear about all-time hockey guys who dominated their era and how they compare to our era greats, Crosby and Ovechkin, this video is for you. Now, I'm only including NHL players in this. So I understand guys like Nusty Lalonde and Georges Vezina and Phantom Joe Malone. These are guys who had their starts to their careers pre 1917 when the NHL was first introduced. So unfortunately, they will not make this list. Also, goalies, I feel like, are their own conversation. I'll probably do a video on that at some point, but I'm not going to be including any goalies on this list. Again, I feel like they're kind of like their own thing. And another piece of context before we go into this, just quickly, average goals scored per team per game each decade, just to kind of get a context of when I say when these guys played, how good their numbers are compared to their era. So in the 2020s, a team averages 3 goals a game, 2010s 2.75, 2000s 2.75, 90s 3.3, 80s 3.85, 70s 3.72, 60s at 2.9, and the 50s at 2.6. So with all of that in mind, and I understand that that is a lot of context to go through, but basically in a nutshell, these are who I think are the 15 greatest NHL players of all time, with a rich tapestry of skill, stats, awards, intangibles, winning, all of that stuff I put into a stew and came up with this list that I think is as objective a list as I could possibly make. At number 15, the only, not the only, but the youngest player on this list by far, Connor McDavid. So he has 1,081 points in 711 games, and he's already put up stats, records, and historical numbers that have not been reached in a very, very long time. Here are just a few of them. So players in NHL history to eclipse 120 points in 3 straight seasons. The list is Gretzky, Lemieux, Marcel Dion, Guy Lafleur, Phil Esposito, Paul Coffey, and now Connor McDavid. He is the second player ever to win the Hart Trophy, the Rocco Richard Trophy, the Ted Lindsay Award, and the Art Ross Trophy in the same season. The only other player to do that is Alex Ovechkin, who you will see later in this video. He put up a 153-point season. The only people to have a better season than that in a 1 year is Stevie Yzerman, Wayne Gretzky, and Mario Lemieux, and Steve Yzerman only beat him by 2 points. He had 42 points in 25 playoff games, only behind Gretzky and Lemieux for the most in one postseason. He became the 6th player ever to be on a losing team and win the Conn Smythe Trophy, and the first skater since Reggie Leach in the 1970s. And to wrap it up, he has 5 scoring titles, 3 MVPs, 4 Ted Lindsays, 1 Conn Smythe, 1 Rocket Richard, 5 first team All NHLs, and 2 second teams. Even with what he's done now at this point, Connor McDavid is a top 15 hockey player of all time. I don't think there's a doubt in anyone's mind he's going to move further up this list, especially if he gets that Stanley Cup monkey off his back. But for now, in terms of skill, what he's already done, how he's dominated his era, I've got McDavid at 15, and he could be a whole heck of a lot higher the next time I do this video. And I spent a little bit extra time on McDavid because I understand it's going to be a controversial choice. I'm going to be a little bit quicker on these guys moving forward, I promise. Number 14, maybe the greatest defensive defenseman of all time, best two-way defenseman of all time, however you want to put it, Nicholas Lidstrom. So Nick Lidstrom has 4 Stanley Cups. He put up 1,142 points in 1,564 games, which is not what he was known for. What he's known for is being maybe the greatest stonewall in the history of the show. He is 8th all-time in plus-minus at plus 450. Simply put, if you put Lindstrom on the ice, the other team was going to struggle to score mightily. This guy ate up 30 minutes a night in the playoffs. Just a model of consistency. He is the second most Norris trophies ever won, tied with Doug Harvey at 7, only behind Bobby Orr with 8. He was the first European-trained player to captain a team to the Stanley Cup, and he won an Olympic gold medal with Sweden in 2006, which might be the greatest achievement of his career. The guy was simply everything that you want in a minutes-eating defenseman. He was a great puck mover, unbelievable skater, physical, and as a leader, he was just described as cool, calm, collected, and just the presence, the even-keeled presence that led that Red Wings team to a stupid amount of playoff appearances in a row. He has, like I mentioned, 7 Norris trophies, a Conn Smythe. He's a 10-time NHL first team player, 2 second teams, and like I said, he won that Olympic gold medal. Nick Lidstrom, just unbelievable. Number 13, Howie Morenz. Now, a lot of you probably don't know who this is, which is a damn shame, because in the era where Howie played, forward passes for the first 6 years of his career were not permitted in the offensive zone. Why does that matter? Well, when you have the inability to pass the puck forward in a whole zone, skating becomes even more important then than it is today. And this guy was simply the best skater of his era by a mile. He won 3 Stanley Cups. He put up 476 points in 550 games in the lowest scoring era in the history of the NHL. And the reason people don't know his name as much as they should is because he had quite a long playing career, but unfortunately, he didn't quite have the life that a lot of legends are able to build after they retire, because he passed away at 37 after shattering his leg during a game where he ran into the boards. And his leg healed, actually, but he later died of a blood clot in the hospital. Some of his teammates said he died of a broken heart because he couldn't play hockey anymore. Like I said, he's regarded as almost undisputedly the best player in the NHL pre-1940. A guy named Eddie Shore is also in that conversation. He almost made this list as well. I have a couple honorable mentions I'll talk about at the end, but Howie Morenz needs more respect in the history of the NHL. He comes in at number 13. Number 12, a guy who you all should know, and if you don't, I'll teach you about him a little bit, because Guy Lafleur was one of the smoothest skating, perfect embodiments of Montreal Canadiens hockey we have ever seen. He won 5 Stanley Cups with the Habs. He put up 1,353 points in 1,126 games. He was the first player in the history of the NHL, not Bobby Orr, not these other guys, not Wayne Gretzky. He was the first ever to put up 50 goals and 100 points in 6 straight seasons. Unbelievable consistency and unbelievable goal scoring prowess. That has only been done by Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky since Lafleur did it. He holds almost every Canadian scoring record, and considering the Canadians are the most historic franchise in the history of the NHL, that means a lot. He won 3 scoring titles. He won 2 MVPs. He won 3 Ted Lindsays. At the time, it was the Lester Pearson Award, 1 Conn Smythe Trophy, and 6 first-team All-NHL appearances. Guy Lafleur, one of the embodiments of the Bleu, Blanc, et Rouge. He comes in at number 12. Number 11, a guy who just straight up not a lot of people know, and if you know me personally, you know I have a weird infatuation with this guy because I think he might be the most underrated player, not just in the history of the NHL, but in the history of sports. Doug Harvey. Doug Harvey won 6 Stanley Cups with the 50s Canadians. He put up 540 points in 1,113 games. But the reason Doug Harvey is such a legend in my eyes is twofold. First of all, he is one of the main reasons the league changed the power play rule to what it is today. Before Doug Harvey, if you had a power play in the NHL, you had the whole 2 minutes. Didn't matter if you scored or not. You had 2 minutes, of an extra man on the ice. So what the Habs would do, because Harvey was such a good puck mover and blue line coordinator, they would score 2, sometimes 3 goals in that 2-minute span. And in an era where goal scoring was down, that would be enough to win games most of the time. So the league voted 5-1 for the new power play rule, I should say. The only team who didn't want the new power play rule was the Canadians, believe it or not. And he was so good. He is one of the main reasons the players started a players union after a fierce contract negotiation with the Habs, which had him land in New York for him standing up to his ownership, as players back in the 50s were basically treated like pawns. They were paid very minimally. They were given wet socks. It was not the glitz and glamour NHL that we have today. Also, people don't understand that he won 7 Norris trophies, only topped by Bobby Orr. And the only year in his prime that he didn't win the Norris trophy, his defense partner won it, and everybody at that time thought it was BS. He made 10 first-team All-NHL teams and 1 second team. Doug Harvey, maybe the most underrated player in the history of sports. Huge fan. Just ahead of him is a defenseman who definitely gets the recognition that he so well deserves, and that is Ray Bourque. He won his Stanley Cup at the end of his career last game with the Avs. He put up 1,579 points in 1,612 games, ending his career, and still the highest scoring defenseman of all time. He also has the most goals by a defenseman of all time. And the thing that's most impressive about Bourque for me isn't those stats. It's the fact that he is 3rd all time in plus minus, despite playing on a pretty terrible Boston Bruins team for 20 years. Especially for the first 5 to 7 years of his career, those Bruins teams were awful. And still, yet, he was able to finish his career 3rd all time in that department. I think it's phenomenal. He won 5 Norris trophies. He won a Calder trophy, 13-time first team All-Star, and 6 second teams. So basically every year of his career but 1, he was looked at as a top 4 defenseman in the NHL. Ray Bourque's the man. He comes in at number 10. Number 9, Jaromir Jagr. Now, this might be low for some for Jagr, but when you see the guys who are ahead of him, I think you're going to find out why. But I mean, no disrespect to one of the greatest scorers in the history of the world. He won 2 Stanley Cups with Pittsburgh. He had 1,921 points in 1,733 games, which is good for 2nd all-time in points. He's 3rd all-time in era-adjusted points, so it's not like he was feasting off his era. And the thing that's so impressive about Jagr, everybody knows how good of a scorer he was. Everybody knows how much of an offensive weapon he was in his prime. But at 42 years old, he led the New Jersey Devils in scoring. And 2 seasons later, at age 44, he led the Florida Panthers in scoring and was the primary factor behind a first-place Atlantic Division finish. He had 4 straight scoring titles. That's only ever been done by him, Gretzky, Esposito, and Howe. He ended his career with 5 scoring titles and MVP, 3 Ted Lindsays, 7 first team All NHLs, and 2 second teams. Jaromir Jagr's unbelievable. He comes in at 9 on this list. Just ahead of him is the embodiment to me of class in hockey in hockey culture, and one of the greatest winners we've ever seen in the history of sports, Jean Beliveau. 10 Stanley Cups for Mr. Beliveau, only topped by his longtime teammate Henri Richat. 1,219 points in 1,125 games, and another 176 points in 162 playoff games. This guy was the captain of captains for this Habs team that obviously was one of the greatest dynasties in the history of sports. He was the first ever winner of the Conn Smythe Trophy. He won 2 MVPs. He won a scoring title, 6 NHL first teams, 4 second teams. And after Maurice Richard left the Habs, he carried on the torch of the organization and carried it, like I said, to another 10 Stanley Cup championships. He was huge. He was unbelievable in the corners, but he had an unbelievable vision to him, a finesse game. And if you got the puck to him in the slot or anywhere near a scoring area, the guy had a belting shot. He was 6'4", a good 200 pounds probably. And like I said, one of the classiest, best representatives of hockey culture we have ever seen. Jean Beliveau coming in at number 8. Number 7, the first of the topic of this video to show up on this list, Alex Ovechkin. 1 Stanley Cup, 1,621 points in 1,489 games, 141 points in the playoffs. He is 5th all-time already, like I mentioned, in era-adjusted points, with another couple points to add on to that. First in adjusted goals by 75 already. And like I said, he definitely has the chance to add on to that and probably should already be about 120 to 130 clear of second place on that list. 9 Rocket Richard trophies. That is by far the most all time, 6 more than second place. Most goals scored ever after this season. He has a scoring title, 3 MVPs, a Conn Smythe, 3 Ted Lindsays, Rookie of the Year, 8-time first team All NHL player, 4-time second team. He ranks just ahead of Beliveau for me, which means I do have Sidney Crosby just a little bit higher than Alex Ovechkin. And I'm saying this as the biggest Alex Ovechkin fan on this side of the Atlantic Ocean, but I have to be objective. And for me, it comes down to the fact that in their primes, I feel Crosby was simply, and even now, is the more complete player, two-way, and definitely a better playmaker. So Sidney Crosby, I think you all know the resume: 3 Stanley Cups, 1,685 points in 1,351 games, 4th all-time in era-adjusted points. He has definitely the chance to jump Jaromir Jagr for 3rd place. He has the most point per game seasons of all time with 20, which was a record that Gretzky had that no one really thought could ever be broken because no one really thought about it. But when Crosby did it, we all went, holy, that's insane. It kind of got overshadowed by the Ovi goal chase a little bit, which, you know, it should have, but at the same time, I felt bad that that record didn't quite get the glow that it should have. He is undefeated in best on best international play, 2 scoring titles, 2 MVPs, 2 Conn Smythes, 3 Ted Lindsay awards, 2 Rocket Richard trophies for a guy who's not really known as a goal scorer, 4 first team All-Stars, 4 second teams. Yeah, Sidney Crosby, number 6. And the top 5 starts now with Maurice Richard. Now, you guys might know about Maurice Richard as the goal scoring trophy is named after him. He has maybe the greatest nickname in the history of hockey, Rocket Richard. But this guy was the most dominant player of his era, and there is a reason why his legacy lives on so well to this day. He won 8 Stanley Cups. He had 966 points in 978 games. He's 12th all-time in era-adjusted goals, which you might say, you know, that's not great. He didn't even play 1,000 games in the NHL. and he's 12th all time in era adjusted goals. He legendarily was the first player ever to score 50 goals in 50 games, and he did it the first time. What? That didn't make any sense. He's the first ever player to score 50 goals in 50 games, first ever player to score 500 goals in their career. He led the league in goals 5 times, and he was so good at hockey and so important to that Habs dynasty that Montreal literally rioted when he was suspended for a playoff game. If you ever have some time on your hands or are just curious, Google the Richard riots. It is one of the craziest stories in sports history. He won an MVP. He was an 8-time first team All NHL player, 6-time second team. He made the All Star game every year of his season but one. He was also just a flat out dog, one of the hardest competitors we've ever seen. Some of the pictures that I've seen of Richard just have this fire in his eyes, man, that he just refused to lose, and he would push you, he would elbow you. And for a guy who scored so many goals, from what I hear, he was not afraid at all to get down and dirty in that era. Maurice Richard ranks just ahead of Crosby and Ovi for the top 5. And the top 4 really is exactly what you would think. I think the Mount Rushmore of hockey is untouched, and I think it will be untouched for a long time, until maybe forever, because I just don't understand how someone is going to build a legacy greater than these 4 guys. And it's impossible to rank them. I think all of them have a different argument for the greatest player of all time. But for this, I'm going to rank them, and I have Gordie Howe at number 4. Everybody knows about Gordie Howe. He has the longest career ever in hockey. He has the 3rd most points now in hockey. He had basically every record when he retired. He had the most goals, most points, most assists. Mr. Hockey. But what people don't know, or at least is a little bit more niche, is the fact that he nearly died on the ice due to a skull fracture in 1950. After that, he was told that he would never play hockey again. And of course, because he's Gordie Howe, he came back the next year and won 4 straight scoring titles. He also played 33 professional hockey league seasons. So, to put that into context, if Wayne Gretzky played as long as Gordie Howe did, he would have retired after the 2012-2013 season. Just the word legend doesn't even begin to describe this guy. He could easily be number 1 on this list, as any of these 4 guys could. Like I said, Gordie Howe comes in at number 4. Number 3 is the greatest defenseman of all time, Bobby Orr. He won 8 Norris trophies, which is the most of all time. He won the Hart Trophy as the NHL's most valuable player 3 straight times, the only defenseman in NHL history to win MVP more than once. He's the only defenseman to win the Art Ross Trophy as the scoring champ, and he did it twice. The guy was simply the greatest defenseman we've ever seen, maybe the greatest skater we've ever seen. The way that people still to this day talk about Bobby Orr playing hockey is like watching Picasso paint, or, one of the greatest hockey players in the history of the world, maybe the greatest. There's really not much more to say about Bobby Orr that you probably haven't heard already. Which brings me to my number 1 and number 2. This was hard. I am so serious. You guys know what players they're going to be. And the question that you have to use to separate these two is a question of personal preference for me. Do you prefer the greatest career of all time, which obviously belongs to Wayne Gretzky? The guy retired holding 51 NHL records, number 1 in points to this day. You could take away all of his goals, he'd still be number 1 in points. He's just a video game career. Or do you want the guy who I think is the best player ever and the most skilled player ever, who at 6'4", 205 had maybe the greatest shot in the history of the league, blazing speed, unbelievable vision? I think if you put Gretzky and Lemieux at one of an out at an ODR, and we were picking teams, like captains, I think Lemieux would go first. I think Lemieux is the best hockey player of all time. And, I'm not the only one who thinks that. The greatest coach of all time, Scotty Bowman, when asked about Lemieux, he said you might have him too low when The Athletic ranked him as the second greatest player ever. Mario's the best player who ever lived, period. That's what Scotty Bowman said. He had to sit out the equivalent of 4 years in his prime while he battled Hodgkin's lymphoma. He basically saved the Pittsburgh Penguins franchise by himself twice. First, when he was drafted, they were going to be moved. And then after he was out of hockey in the early 2000s, they were going to move as well. He just bought the team and kept them in Pittsburgh and then passed on that legacy to Sid the Kid. And I don't have to say anything about Wayne Gretzky. His legacy speaks for himself. So this was a very long video. If you made it to the end, say, what's a good thing to say in the comments if you made it to the end? Say, why am I blanking on this? I just spent a good 35 minutes on talking about NHL history, and I didn't miss a beat. But when it comes to saying something in the comments that you guys should put, say, Lemieux 1A. Put in the comments Lemieux 1A, Gretzky 1A. Say who you think is the greatest between those two guys. That's all. Thank you all so much for watching. If you made it this far from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate it. I did put a lot of research into this video. Did you disagree with the rankings? Please let me know in the comments section below what you guys think. Who did I have too high? Who did I have too low? I love hearing it. If you enjoy what you saw, please hit the like button. If you really enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button. The Spit Sports Show just hit over 400 subscribers. Big things happening on the channel. And as always, I will see you all in the next one. Peace out. Love you guys.